Hey, I'm Andrew with 10 Minute Therapy. And in today's video, we're going to continue looking in this series on marriage at things that have to relate to marriage and things we can do to improve the overall quality of marriage. And so in today's video, I want to take a break from bigger picture concepts and look at something a little more practical, and that is communication. Now, communication is a big topic. We're going to break that down even farther today. I want to talk today just about the concept of listening and why listening might be the most important thing missing in your marriage. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and start the clock and we'll get right to it. So, over the last couple of videos, we've been examining the concept of marriage and really more specifically, some bigger picture concepts. The idea that marriage is fundamentally not about me, but about how I might, in humility, lower myself and consider my spouse as greater than myself. That I would lower my own wants and needs to raise up theirs and take on humility in that sense. And as we've looked at some of these bigger picture concepts, I want to do something very different today and look at something very practical. That is, I want to walk through a concept that, if you could take and apply into your marriage, could have a profound impact on the way you communicate. Now, communication and fairness is a pretty big topic. We could spend many, many hours discussing communication and communication styles and all different aspects of it, why things get lost in communication. But the reality is this: I believe that the vast majority of marriage issues could be resolved if we were more committed to improving our communication skills. Let me say that again. I believe wholeheartedly that the vast majority of marital issues could be resolved if we were just more committed to improving our communication skills. Yes, there are things in marriage that need to be tackled with a professional in the room, a third party, someone to help mediate and guide and teach. Yes, there are things in marriage that come up that are bigger than just communication. I'm not saying there aren't. What I am saying is that so many of our marriage issues could be resolved if we could talk about it. And more importantly, if we could listen. And so today I want to just cover one concept, and that is specific to listening. And so, my hope is that this will be a good takeaway and that this would be the kind of video that you'd say, "Hey, I'm going to share this with somebody that I know could benefit from it." Because what I'm going to share with you is something that we all need to learn. And if we would all commit to practicing, would improve all of our relationships: professional, personal, familial, and certainly the marriage relationship. So, what I'm going to do now is introduce you to what we often just call the talker listener technique. So the talker listener technique is something that I would say to you is simple, but not easy. Simple and easy mean two different things. Simple means it's not complex. The steps I'm going to present to you today, you're going to be able to understand and you are capable of practicing them. But it's not easy. In fact, it's pretty hard to do what I'm going to challenge you to do today. And the reason is because all of us as humans have such a desire to speak and to be heard, that active listening is not always a natural response of our hearts. So, what you're about to hear is simple, but it's not easy. And we simply call it the talker listener technique. Now, to start, fundamentally, the talker listener technique implies that in any conversation, whether it's a heated dispute between me and my spouse, or just a friendly chat with my child at the end of a school day, maybe it's a lunch break conversation with a coworker, or a more professional conversation with my boss, I can apply this in any which way. Every conversation, I can take on the talker listener technique ideas and practice them. In fact, I'm going to challenge you that the easiest way to hone these skills and get better at practicing this talker listener technique, more specifically the active listening parts, is actually easier to practice them in easy conversations, daily conversations. If I can do that, then applying them in a more heated moment of disagreement or argument becomes a little more rational, a little more possible. So here's how it works. Step number one requires that I recognize that in any conversation, in any moment, there needs to be a talker, there needs to be a listener. Now, you might think to yourself, well, that's not very profound. That sounds pretty basic. But let's be real. Let's be honest for just a moment. How often in a marriage discussion when we don't agree, excuse me, when we are disagreeing about something and we do not agree, how often are we both talking at the same time? How often are we trying to talk over each other? How often does that then raise the volume until we're both shouting? One of us needs to talk and one of us needs to listen. So, listener, I'm going to encourage you here. If you want to profoundly change your marriage, be the first one to listen. Look, in our world, thanks to the rise of the internet and the advent of social media, we live in a world where everyone seemingly has a megaphone immediately at their access. And it's always a game of who can shout the loudest, say the meanest thing, and be heard over the others louder and clearer. We don't want to do that in marriage. So if you want to change your marriage, be the first one to listen. And it might look like something as simple as saying, "Hey, I see that you're upset about this. Can I'm just going to listen. You tell me what's going on. Tell me what you're thinking. I'll shut my mouth and I'm just going to hear you out." Be the first one to listen. Give your spouse permission to be the first one to speak. Rarely have I ever found that that is an ineffective tool. Why? Because people love to speak. We love to be heard. So if you will take on the role of listener first and allow your spouse to be the talker first, we can really get somewhere quickly. So, step one, someone talks, someone listens. I'm encouraging you to be the listener. Step number two, the talker gets to speak. They get to share their thoughts, opinions, frustrations, whatever it is that we're talking about in this particular scenario. The talker gets to run off with it and share. And the listener's job, I know this sounds simple, but it's not easy, is just to listen. The listener's job is to actively listen. Now we need to pause here because this is the crux of it. This is the hardest part is what we would call active listening. Now you might think to yourself, I'm a pretty good listener, right? I thought the same thing of myself when I started working on my degree in counseling and I read a book called The Lost Art of Listening. I started into it thinking, I'm a great listener. And what I found very quickly was I am a terrible listener. The truth is, many of us are. So think for a second. Do you believe you're a good listener? And let me ask you some questions. When you're listening to someone who might be upset with you, or even accusing you, or maybe is just frustrated or has a certain opinion you don't agree with, as they're sharing and you're listening, is your mind actively thinking about the things this person is saying? Or is it possible that while the other person's talking, that you might have your mouth not moving, but your mind might be compiling a list of rebuttals of what you're going to say in response to that other person? Or maybe your mind is compiling your defense, how you're going to defend your position once it's your turn to speak. Or maybe you're compiling a list almost like a debate of how you're going to prove the other person wrong. If your mind is doing any of those things, I hate to break it to you, but you are not actively listening to this other person. And in marriage, this leads to issues. So, the listener's job is to listen, but to actively listen. What does that look like? It looks like not letting my mind build a list of rebuttals and points that I'm going to say. It looks like not letting my mind think about how it's going to defend its position. It is not creating a list of how I'm going to prove the other person wrong. If I'm doing any of those things, I am not actively listening to my spouse. So, what does that mean? That means that I'm actively listening. I'm thinking about what you're saying to me and take it a step farther. How is it that you're really feeling about what you're saying? So often, when we're sharing something, we don't always do the best job of communicating it clearly. And so the listener's job is to try to listen close enough to cut through some of the words and really understand the heart of the message that the other person is communicating with you. This is at the heart of the talker listener technique, to take on listening first and listen well enough to put aside my own responses, my own desires, my own rebuttals, and my own defenses so that I can clearly hear what you're saying to me. So now we get into what is arguably my favorite step in the talker listener technique. Once the talker has expressed themselves, the listener has listened well, putting aside all their own responses. Here's what we don't do. What would be unproductive is for the listener to immediately, once that person has finished talking, jump in with their own thoughts and opinions, right? Put yourself on the receiving end of that. How many times in life have you shared something, a thought, an opinion, maybe something serious, maybe something vulnerable? And the person listening to you immediately, the second you close your mouth, boom, they've got a response for you. They're going to tell you their opinion. They're going to tell you how to fix it. They're going to tell you why you're wrong or whatever the response is. And your first thought when someone immediately speaks, the second you close your lips, you think, I don't even know that this person really heard me. Right? It's so deflating when that happens, so discouraging. And when we apply that in the context of marriage, over time, it leads to a lot of discouragement and division. So here's a simple thing, listener. When you take on the role of listening, you're actively listening. You're not building your list of defenses and rebuttals. And you do not immediately speak when the other person has finished talking. Instead, I'm going to give you another step here. Pause. Just take a pause. Pause for one moment. Sit in silence for a moment or two. It's okay to be silent. Silence gives space to reflect. It gives space for the other person to collect their thoughts because maybe they had one more thing they wanted to add on. It gives space for you to think clearly. It gives space for both of us not to react emotionally. Take a pause. And now the listener has their most important job because now that the talker has finished talking, there's been a pause. The listener is not going to share their thoughts and opinions just yet. We're going to do that soon. But the listener now has their most important job. It is to summarize back to the talker what I believe I'm hearing you say. So let me give you an example. If you're the talker and I've been listening to you and you finish what you're saying, and I pause for a minute and I'm sort of nodding and I'm making eye contact, I'm showing you that I'm listening. And then I might say something to you like, man, it sounds like you're having a really hard time with what your sister said to you. And it's sounds like you're pretty frustrated and it's been hard to maybe get past that. I don't have to parrot back everything you just said to me, all the details, all the things, but I just want to show you that I listened and that I understand what you're communicating. Now, here's the most beautiful thing about this part of the process. There's nothing more validating than when you have shared something and someone says back to you, wow, sounds like you're pretty frustrated about that thing. Right? They're validating your words, your thoughts, and they're showing you with their words and eye contact, I understand what you're saying. Nothing is more validating to our hearts to be heard and understood. But here's the other really cool thing. Let's say that you've shared with me a whole bunch of thoughts about something that's been bothering you. And I summarize back to you, wow, it sounds like you're telling me you're really embarrassed about what happened at the family night the other night. And maybe I got that wrong. Maybe embarrassed is not really how you're feeling. And that's not the point of what you were communicating with me. By me summarizing back to you what I thought I heard you say, you can now say, no, that's not really what I meant. Let me try again. And now you get to share again, and I'm going to listen again, and then I'm going to respond again with, okay, so you're telling me it was an embarrassment. You're hurt. You're frustrated over the way you were treated. Yes, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Right. So when I summarize back as the listener what the talker is saying, it not only validates them and it shows them that respect and honor and care that you're giving them, but it also gives them a chance to be validated with, yes, that's what I'm trying to tell you, or no, it's not, which tells me I need to find a different way to communicate this. And so this active listening skill of listening, pausing, and then summarizing back, I'm telling you, this can single-handedly change a marriage. It can change any relationship. Again, you can apply this when you're listening to your children talk about their day. They tell you about the drama they're going through in middle school, and you're like, wow, it sounds like you're really sad about the way those girls treated you. And your daughter says, "Yeah, I am. It's really bothering me." Right? You've showed love and honor and respect, and you've taught them active listening by modeling it yourself. You apply it in a professional relationship, and you're showing professionalism, and you're showing care, and you're showing consideration. You're showing that you're alert and attending to details. You apply it in a marriage, and you show the greatest honor, love, and respect you could to your spouse. You give them a space to be heard and understood, which is what all of our hearts yearn for and long for. So, to run back through that real quick, talker, listener, be the first one to listen, offer for the other person to share, actively listen to what they're saying. Don't build up a list of defenses and rebuttals in your head. Give them eye contact, nod, do something to show them with your body language that you're engaged. And when they finish talking, don't immediately jump in with your thoughts and opinions. Instead, pause for a moment. Just give a moment for that breath. And then summarize back. It sounds like you're telling me. And summarize back what you think you're hearing them say. If you got it wrong, you've given them permission to share again. Sorry, I guess I didn't understand you fully. Can you help me understand? Try again, and listen again, and summarize back. If you got it right, if you summarize and the person says, "Yeah, that's what I'm saying," say, "Okay, I understand." Now we switch roles. Now the talker becomes the listener. And you, the listener, you took on listening first. Now it's your turn to share your thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and trust that your spouse is going to model back what you've just modeled for them. This is one of the most practical things that I could possibly give you. As I said, it's very simple, but it is not easy. Why? Because when we're frustrated, angry, sad, hurt, or any range of emotion, we want to be heard first. We want to talk over the other person. We want to be understood. But I promise you that if you want that in your marriage, the best way is to start with active listening. As you can see, we're completely out of time in our video. So let me just wrap this up by saying this is one of the most practical things I could offer you. But I believe in the context of marriage, if we can learn to become excellent listeners, we can vastly improve and profoundly improve the quality of our marriages, but also ensure that marriages last for a lifetime. If this video was helpful for you in any way, I encourage you to share it with someone you love or care about, someone who might benefit from it, so that we can keep the message of healthy marriages and good mental and emotional health ongoing. But join us next time. We're going to continue in this video series on marriages. And in the meantime, I'm Andrew with 10 Minute Therapy. God bless.